probably think prison has nothing to do with you. But think about this. There's a man who ended up in one of these facilities over a traffic ticket.
Can I see your license and registration, please?
$200 unpaid, and 5 years later, he's still inside. Never tried, never convicted of anything. You don't have to be a criminal to end up there. You just have to be unlucky on the wrong day. And if that day ever comes, 2 brutal prisons in America await. But which one is the worst? That's exactly what we're here to find out. And by the end of this, you'll know which one to fear more. Round 1. Daily violence. This is the first thing you'd feel.
Clayton County doesn't have a violence problem. It has a violence ecosystem. Stabbings happen almost every day, not in isolated incidents, daily. The weapons aren't improvised in desperation. They're manufactured with intention, traded openly, and carried as routine. Inmates have demonstrated on camera exactly how they're made. Metal shaved to a flat edge because, as one explained, a flat blade is harder to stitch than a puncture wound. One inmate, 25 years old, had been inside since he was 20. His original case had been acquitted. He was still there because the environment had made him into someone who couldn't leave. Every charge added inside was a charge that kept him in. The facility that was supposed to hold him temporarily had become the thing that made temporary impossible.
San Quentin's violence is structural rather than daily. Racial gang architecture, Norteños, Sureños, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, means that conflict isn't personal, it's organizational. You might have no issue with the man across from you, but if his group and yours are at war, your feelings are irrelevant. The organizational logic supersedes the individual every time. Former inmates describe the yard as a place where a fight can erupt not from personal grievance, but from collective obligation. You cannot resolve it through personal diplomacy. You cannot opt out. That is a different, and in some ways harder kind of danger to navigate than anything Clayton County produces on a daily basis.
Well, Clayton takes the first point. But violence is only one way a place can destroy you. Round 2, what the walls themselves look like. Sewer water on cell floors, ceilings leaking, toilets broken for weeks, showers with no doors, bed bugs in almost every mattress, every wall vent, every piece of clothing, despite $20,000 a month spent on pest control. The sheriff's office argues inmates who refuse to clean their cells give the bugs a place to multiply. The inmates counter that they're being asked to maintain a facility the institution has already abandoned. Both things can be true. The result is the same: people sleeping on infested mattresses on floors next to broken toilets. The facility holds nearly 4 times its design capacity. That ratio makes meaningful cleanliness structurally impossible, regardless of intentions. You cannot clean a facility this overcrowded in any sustained way. The bugs, the sewage, the broken infrastructure, these are not lapses. They are the predictable result of a population size that should have been addressed years ago and wasn't.
San Quentin's degradation is biological in a way Clayton County's isn't. Human feces on walls, unaddressed for months in certain units. Not isolated cases, described as a systemic condition, the result of mental illness, institutional indifference, and physical decay combining into something that inspectors and advocates have repeatedly called incompatible with basic human dignity. The cells average 4.5 by 10 feet per person, smaller than most walk-in closets, designed to contain a human life for 23 hours a day. The infrastructure is over a century old. Corroded pipes, failed ventilation, a physical plant the state has known for decades needs comprehensive reconstruction and has chosen, consistently, to patch. Because the cost of genuine renovation would force a question nobody wants to answer.
what is this place actually for?
San Quentin answers back. Score tied. Round 3, and this one comes down to numbers. 535 designed capacity, nearly 2,000 inside, almost 4 to 1. That ratio means mattresses on floors, in corridors, in day rooms converted by sheer pressure of numbers into additional sleeping areas. People living for years in conditions that would violate every basic standard of emergency shelter, let alone a correctional facility. The county board received a $375,000 consulting report confirming they needed 100 additional officers to run the facility safely. Their response? Cut 40 existing positions to save $10 million. The overcrowding at Clayton County is not an accident or an oversight. It is a deliberate political decision made by people who go home at the end of the day.
San Quentin's overcrowding reached a point where the federal government had to step in. In 2011, the Supreme Court ruled in Brown v. Plata that California prison conditions constituted cruel and unusual punishment and ordered the state to reduce its population to 137.5% of design capacity. The state complied, slowly, over years, through early releases and transfers. But the policies that caused the overcrowding remained intact. Mandatory sentencing, 3 strikes provisions, a political culture that rewards toughness and punishes any suggestion that the prison population should be smaller. The intervention addressed the pressure gauge. The furnace is still running at full temperature. Clayton pulls ahead, but overcrowding is only part of the story. Round 4, the social rules that govern every hour of every day. Clayton County operates the CAR system, racial separation governing who you eat with, who you trade with, and who you can approach. First-timers walk in with no knowledge of any of it. Nobody explains it. The rules apply from the moment you arrive, regardless of whether you know them or not. And the CAR system here applies equally to the person convicted of a violent felony and the person who came in on a traffic citation. The system does not calibrate its politics to the seriousness of your offense. You are a race before you are a person, from the moment you walk through the intake door. At San Quentin, racial segregation is not a social convention. It is physical infrastructure. Separate toilets, separate showers, separate barbers. Sharing food across racial lines is a code violation with real consequences. The depth of this separation reflects decades of development, layered over successive generations of inmates who learned it, enforced it on arrivals, and left behind a structure more durable than many of the physical walls. Most inmates no longer experience it as a rule. It has become an ambient condition, something that simply is, the way weather simply is. California prohibits racial discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. Inside San Quentin, the law that applies to every other institution in the state does not reach the toilet block. All right, San Quentin ties it up again. 2 points each, halfway through. Let's take stock of what we know. Well, 4 rounds in. Score tied, 2 each. Halfway through, what this fight has already shown us is not that these facilities are equivalent, it's that they represent 2 different expressions of the same underlying choice: to spend as little as possible on the people inside, and to frame that as a budget decision rather than a moral one. 4 rounds left. The categories coming up cut deepest: death row, food served at 3 in the morning, the psychological cost of years in isolation, and the legal machinery that is supposed to oversee all of it. The score is tied. It will not stay that way for long. And it's about to get darker. Round 5, the threat that has no equivalent anywhere else in this comparison. Clayton County's unique threat targets the people who have no business being there. Someone picked up for a traffic fine, unable to make $200 bail,
placed in a general population unit where they are immediately identifiable as a target. The demand is direct: send money to this account or face the consequences. For someone whose family couldn't make bail, finding more money from outside is impossible. The physical consequences of inability to pay are documented. This happens to people who have not been convicted of anything. The mechanism that is supposed to protect the innocent, the presumption of innocence, the right to bail, has broken down so completely that people are being extorted inside a county jail for charges they may never have committed.
San Quentin houses California's only male death row, more than 700 men at its peak, all living under the state's formal determination that they should not continue to exist. The gas chamber was last used in 1996. Lethal injection protocols have been in legal dispute for years. The executions have paused. The men on death row have not left. They have simply been waiting longer, in greater uncertainty, for an end that remains official state policy. For everyone else in the facility, the presence of death row shapes the atmosphere of the entire institution. San Quentin is a place where the state has put some of its citizens for the purpose of eventually killing them. That fact does not stay on one corridor, it permeates. And nothing in the Clayton County comparison carries that specific weight.
San Quentin takes the lead for the first time. One round left before the final stretch. Round 6. And sometimes, the smallest details reveal the most. Breakfast at Clayton County arrives between 3 and 4 in the morning. The body is at its lowest metabolic point. The mind is supposed to be asleep. What arrives on the tray is described by the people who receive it in terms that leave no ambiguity. It is calories, technically. It is not nutrition. And it is not delivered at a time when any human body can make use of it effectively. For inmates with no family support and no canteen access, this is all there is. The inequality of nutrition inside the facility maps directly onto the inequality of resources outside it. If you have money coming in from outside, you eat adequately. If you don't, you don't. The jail has outsourced the question of adequate nutrition to the economic circumstances of each inmate's family. San Quentin's food arrives in a brown paper bag at a reasonable hour. It is not good food. It is institutional food, made without particular care, designed to meet minimum caloric requirements rather than any meaningful nutritional standard. But it arrives when the body is awake. In a comparison where nearly every other category produces a close contest or a clear loss, food is the round where the gap is clearest and the explanation is simplest. Clayton County feeds its inmates at 3:47 in the morning. San Quentin feeds its inmates in a bag. The bar is low. Clearing it is enough to win this round. Clayton pulls it back to 3-3. 2 rounds left. Both facilities need one more point to win. Round 7. The cost that doesn't show up on any incident report. The mental health cost at Clayton County concentrates on a specific and brutal irony. The people paying it most heavily are people who have not been convicted of anything. Sitting in restricted housing for 23 hours a day, in a space smaller than a bathroom, with no resources, no attorney contact, no trial date, and no end in sight. The psychological research on extended isolation is consistent and unambiguous. It causes damage. The question is not whether this schedule harms people. It is why, knowing that, it continues. The mental health unit at Clayton County is understaffed and overcrowded. When it fills, inmates with serious psychiatric conditions are placed in general population regardless, where their behavior becomes a risk for everyone around them and their illness goes untreated. The facility has a mental health unit in name. In practice, it is a waiting room with no treatment at the end of the wait.
San Quentin's mental cost is longer and slower than Clayton County's. Inmates who have spent decades inside have systematically suppressed the instincts that functional human relationships require: vulnerability, trust, the capacity to ask for help, because those instincts are liabilities in a maximum security environment. Then they are released into a world that has no place for them. No housing, because landlords won't rent to people with felony records. No employment, because employers won't hire them. Parole conditions requiring stable housing and employment that are structurally impossible to obtain. A parole officer who will revoke the parole when the conditions are inevitably not met. The revolving door is not a failure of the system. It is the system operating exactly as designed, producing returns that count as recidivism statistics rather than policy consequences.
San Quentin goes ahead again. Last round. Clayton needs this one to force a tie. Round 8. The legal machinery that is supposed to oversee all of it. The Speedy Trial Act sets a federal guideline of 70 days from indictment to trial. At Clayton County, people are sitting for 5 years without seeing an attorney, without a bond hearing, without stepping inside a courtroom. The Sixth Amendment guarantee of a speedy trial is one of the foundational rights of the American legal system. Inside Clayton County, it is theoretical. The causes are documented and understood by everyone involved. Public defenders overloaded beyond any reasonable capacity. Courts backed up so far that scheduling a trial in any reasonable time frame is operationally impossible. Constant DA turnover that resets processes with every change in leadership. None of these are forces of nature. They are the accumulated result of consistent decisions to underfund every part of the legal system that serves people without money. San Quentin operates within a legal framework that has been reformed at the margins, but never at the center. The federal intervention in Brown v. Plata required California to reduce its prison population. The state complied. What it did not do was address the mandatory sentencing laws, 3 strikes provisions, and political incentives that produced the population in the first place. The reforms are real and they matter, but they are operating against a current that has been running in the opposite direction for 50 years. The conditions that produced San Quentin's worst periods are still present in the underlying policy architecture of California's criminal justice system. The pressure has been released. The valve has not been fixed. Well, well, well. Last point for Clayton. But I'm not surprised, given these results. You can see for yourself how tight the competition was. Clayton County destroys people before they've been found guilty of anything. It takes someone who may have committed nothing more than a traffic violation, places them in a facility at 4 times capacity with daily stabbings, denies them access to an attorney or a courtroom for years, and calls this the legal system in operation. San Quentin destroys people after the legal system is finished with them. It takes someone who has served their sentence, who has sometimes spent decades inside, and releases them into a world designed to send them back. Different stage, different mechanism, the same result. Look, I came into this thinking Clayton County was going to run away with it. Turns out, San Quentin had other plans. 4-4. But here's the thing. Even if one of them had won by a landslide, it wouldn't matter. Not a single second inside either of these places is worth it. Not for you, not for anyone you know. The consequences don't stay inside the walls. They follow you home. They follow your family. They follow your name. So take this for what it is, a look at something you never want to experience firsthand.